Michael Chen wiped sweat from his brow as he examined the empty vine where, just yesterday, a perfect Cherokee purple tomato had been growing. This wasn't random animal damage. The cut was clean, deliberate. Someone had used scissors or clippers. Not again, he muttered, running his fingers through his salt and pepper hair. After 12-hour shifts in the ICU, Michael's meticulously planned garden was his therapy. 3 years of composting, soil testing, and selecting rare heirloom varieties had transformed his backyard in the uptight Oakwood Heights subdivision into an oasis. His neighbors grew grass. Michael grew food with stories: Brandywine tomatoes from Amish seeds, Japanese eggplants, and peppers from his grandmother's village in Taiwan. The tomato thefts had started exactly 2 weeks ago. At first, he blamed squirrels for the disappearance of a single black crumb. Then a mortgage lifter vanished. Yesterday, 3 Roma tomatoes. Today, his prized Cherokee purple, the one he'd been photographing daily, planning to enter in the county fair. The precision bothered him most. Only the perfectly ripe tomatoes disappeared, not the green ones, not the slightly overripe ones. Whoever was doing this knew gardening, and they knew his schedule too. The thefts always occurred in the 30-minute window when Michael showered after his morning garden tending. As he stood contemplating the empty vine, Mrs. Abernathy from next door leaned over the fence. "More trouble with your tomatoes, Michael?" she asked with forced sympathy, her eyes darting to the street. "Perhaps it's a sign you should stick to ornamentals like the rest of us." Michael forced a polite smile. "Just a minor setback, Mrs. Abernathy. The garden's doing wonderfully otherwise." "Well, Brenda mentioned at book club that vegetable gardens can attract all sorts of unwanted elements." Mrs. Abernathy's pearl earrings caught the morning light as she tilted her head meaningfully. "Not that I'm one to gossip." "Ah, Brenda, of course." Brenda Wilkins, HOA vice president and self-appointed neighborhood aesthetic enforcer. Since Michael had moved in 3 years ago, she'd file complaints about his mailbox color, midnight blue instead of navy blue, his garbage cans, visible from the street for 6 hours instead of the mandated 4, and most persistently, his garden. "Thanks for the concern," Michael said, watching Mrs. Abernathy retreat to her yard of identical hydrangeas. Brenda approved, no doubt. Inside, Michael pulled out his gardening journal, flipping through detailed notes on planting dates, germination rates, and harvest yields. On the current page, he'd started documenting the thefts, complete with dates and estimated times. He added today's entry with a photograph of the cleanly cut stem. The nurse in him appreciated data. The pattern was undeniable. Thefts occurred only on Tuesdays and Fridays, precisely during his post-gardening shower between 7:30 and 8 o'clock am. Too specific for wildlife, too deliberate for coincidence. His phone chimed with a text from the hospital, a request to pick up an extra shift that evening. Michael sighed, knowing he'd have to postpone his plans to install a motion-activated sprinkler system he'd ordered online. The hospital was chronically understaffed, and as a charge nurse, he felt responsible for his unit. Later that afternoon, returning from the grocery store, Michael noticed Brenda Wilkins power walking through the neighborhood in her coordinated athleisure wear. She slowed as she passed his house, her gaze lingering on his garden beds. "Hello, Michael," she called with rehearsed cheerfulness. "Getting ready for the garden tour next month? I don't recall seeing your name on the registration list." "Just growing for myself," he replied, "though I might enter some tomatoes in the county fair, if I can keep them on the vine long enough." Something flickered in Brenda's eyes. Satisfaction? Amusement? She adjusted her designer sunglasses. "Such a shame about the local wildlife. My roses suffered terribly until I installed motion sensors and those ultrasonic repellers." She gestured vaguely toward her perfectly manicured yard across the street and 2 houses down. "Perhaps your unconventional plantings are simply more attractive to pests." As she continued her walk, Michael noticed something odd: a small insulated lunch bag clipped to her belt. Perfect size for collecting samples. That evening, after his hospital shift, Michael sat at his kitchen counter researching security cameras. the gentle hum of his refrigerator competing with the chorus of cicadas outside. On his laptop screen, dozens of review tabs compared features and prices. Beside him lay the HOA bylaws handbook, annotated with yellow sticky notes, and a book titled Gardener's Guide to Pest Control. Though the pests he was now considering weren't the six-legged variety. His sister Leela's words from their last phone call echoed in his mind. You can't just let people walk all over you, Mikey. Sometimes you have to fight back, creatively. Michael smiled as a plan began taking shape in his mind. The Oakwood Heights Community Center buzzed with the forced politeness of neighbors who mostly tolerated each other. Michael hesitated at the entrance to the monthly HOA meeting, clutching a folder of printed photos documenting his garden before and after the thefts. Michael, come sit by me, called Raj Patel, one of the few allies Michael had in the neighborhood. Brenda's on a warpath tonight, something about unapproved birdhouses on Maple Street. As if summoned by her name, Brenda Wilkins strode to the podium. At 62, she maintained the highlighted blonde bob and tennis physique she'd had in her 40s. Her coral blazer matched her lipstick, and the HOA bylaws booklet in her hand was tabbed with color-coded sticky notes. Before we address the agenda items, Brenda announced with practiced authority, I'd like to remind everyone that vegetable gardens are restricted to rear yards only and should not be visible from the street. Some residences are in violation. Her gaze locked with Michael's. When the meeting opened for community concerns, Michael raised his hand. I'd like to report a series of thefts from my garden, he said, sliding photos across the table. Someone is specifically targeting my tomatoes. The room filled with uncomfortable shifting. Brenda's smile tightened. This neighborhood has virtually no crime, she declared, barely glancing at his evidence. I'm sure it's just animals. Perhaps your unconventional gardening is attracting pests, which is exactly why we have guidelines about these things. Michael stood his ground. Animals don't use pruning shears, Brenda, and they don't take only the ripest fruit. Are you suggesting a neighbor is stealing your tomatoes? Brenda's voice rose in practiced outrage. That's a serious accusation. Several homeowners, including Mrs. Abernathy, nodded emphatically. I'm not accusing anyone specifically, Michael clarified. I'm asking if we can send an email to residents about respecting private property, including gardens. That seems reasonable, Raj supported. Brenda's smile could have cut glass. We'll take it under advisement. Now, moving on to the unapproved lawn ornament situation on Elm Drive. As the meeting adjourned, Michael noticed Brenda examining the photos he'd left behind, her manicured finger tracing the image of his prized Cherokee purple. Something in her. You've got that look, said Leela, Michael's sister, watching him pace around his kitchen after the HOA meeting. A botany professor at the State University, she'd stopped by to drop off some rare herb cuttings. The one you had before putting blue dye in Bobby Tanner's shampoo after he stole your science project. Michael's dark eyes gleamed as he gestured to his laptop. On screen was an order confirmation for a wireless security camera disguised as a bird feeder. Catching her is only half the satisfaction, he explained. I want her to regret ever touching my garden. Layla raised an eyebrow. What exactly are you plotting? Michael's smile was slow and deliberate. Remember that botanical research project you mentioned? The one with the super hot peppers? The next day, Michael drove 90 minutes to Fertile Ground, a specialty nursery run by one of Leela's former students. The owner, a tattooed woman with soil-stained hands, led him to a greenhouse section marked Extreme Heat. Brenda's still in the hospital, he whispered. Severe esophageal burns, swelling, the works. They thought it was anaphylaxis, but the doctors are saying it's chemical burns from some kind of extreme irritant. Michael arranged his face into concerned surprise. How awful. Did they figure out what caused it? That's the weird part. Raj leaned closer. She kept insisting someone poisoned her garden tomatoes. Except what? Everyone knows Brenda doesn't garden. Not vegetables anyway. Just those perfect hybrid tea roses she enters in competitions. The meeting was called to order by Frank Delgado, the HOA president, a retired judge who generally let Brenda run the show. Tonight, however, he looked grim. As many of you have heard, our Vice President Brenda Wilkins experienced a severe medical emergency yesterday. She's stable but will require significant recovery time. Frank cleared his throat. In her absence, she has submitted her resignation from the board, effective immediately. Murmurs rippled through the room. There's another matter, Frank continued, his judicial demeanor firmly in place. Ms. Wilkins has also asked me to extend, and I quote, sincere apologies to anyone whose property rights may have been inadvertently violated during her tenure. The room fell silent. Additionally, the board has decided to update our bylaws regarding gardens and food production. Effective immediately, residents are encouraged to grow vegetables, fruits, and herbs in both back and front yards, provided they are maintained in an aesthetically pleasing manner. Michael felt Rad's elbow in his ribs. Did you have something to do with this? He whispered. Michael smiled innocently. I have absolutely no idea what you mean. After the meeting, Frank approached Michael with surprising directness. Interesting timing on Brenda's situation, he said quietly, particularly given her adamant beliefs about your garden. Michael met his gaze steadily. Very interesting. Frank's eyes flickered to the USB drive Michael was fidgeting with. I imagine there's quite a story there. There might be video evidence of certain activities, Michael admitted, hypothetically speaking. The older man nodded slowly. Hypothetically, such evidence might be best kept private, now that the situation has resolved itself. 2 days later, Michael found a sealed envelope in his mailbox containing 5 crisp $20 bills and a card with Brenda's monogram, but no signature. Inside was written, compensation for property removal. My deepest apologies. At the September HOA meeting, Michael arrived carrying a large basket lined with checkered cloth. Inside were dozens of perfectly ripe heirloom tomatoes, Cherokee purples, black crims, yellow brandywines, and green zebras, artfully arranged by color. From my garden to your tables, he announced, placing the basket on the refreshment table. And I'm happy to share growing tips with anyone interested. As neighbors eagerly selected tomatoes, complementing their unusual colors and shapes, Mrs. Abernathy approached hesitantly. I've been thinking of trying some cherry tomatoes next season, she admitted. My grandchildren might enjoy helping. I have seeds you can start indoors in February, Michael offered. And I found a good security camera system, if you're worried about wildlife. In the corner, Raj nearly choked on his coffee. That fall, Michael expanded his garden by 8 square feet. Most of the space went to rare garlic varieties and winter greens, but in one corner, safely labeled with skull and crossbones markers, grew a small but thriving patch of Carolina Reapers, a spicy reminder that justice has a way of finding its target. And the security camera, disguised as a cheerful birdhouse, remained in place, just in case another HOA board member developed a taste for others' harvests. Carolina Reapers, she explained, gesturing to innocent-looking plants with small wrinkled red fruits. World record holder at over 2 million Scoville units, handle with gloves. Seriously, a single drop of oil under your fingernail will have you crying for hours. She studied Michael's face. Your sister mentioned you're having garden pest issues. Human pests, Michael clarified. Someone with an unhealthy interest in my tomatoes. Ah, the woman nodded knowingly. Then I recommend these seedlings, already 6 weeks along. With proper care and these growth accelerants, she handed him several bottles. They'll fruit in another month max. The Reapers look remarkably similar to certain plum tomato varieties, especially from a distance. That evening, as twilight fell, Michael carefully transplanted his remaining legitimate tomato plants to large ceramic pots on his screened back porch. In their place, wearing double nitrile gloves, he planted the Carolina Reapers in rich, amended soil, arranging them in the exact configuration his tomatoes had occupied. For the next 3 weekends, he nurtured the pepper plants with the fervor of a mad scientist, applying the growth accelerants, providing perfect growing conditions, and training the plants to resemble tomato growth patterns. He even tied small red ribbons exactly where ripe tomatoes would logically appear. When the camera arrived, Michael woke at 4 a.m. to install it inside a convincing birdhouse with a perfect view of his garden. He tested the motion sensor and live feed to his phone repeatedly, making subtle adjustments until the coverage was flawless. Now we wait, he told his actual tomatoes, now safely growing on his porch, and made the punishment fit the crime. By late August, Michael's Carolina Reapers had reached perfect ripeness, deceptively innocent orbs of fiery red that could have easily been mistaken for Roma tomatoes by anyone who wasn't a serious gardener. Each morning, Michael performed the same ritual: garden at 6:30 a.m., visibly admire his tomatoes, then head inside at precisely 7:30 for his shower, leaving a 30-minute window of opportunity. "Not today, Satan," he whispered on Tuesday morning as he set his phone to record the live camera feed. In his bathroom, water ran in the shower, but Michael sat fully dressed on the closed toilet lid, watching his phone intently. The screen remained quiet for 11 minutes. Then motion triggered the camera. Brenda Wilkins power walked into frame wearing a coordinated teal tracksuit and wide-brimmed sun hat. She paused at Michael's fence, pretended to adjust her shoelace, then glanced up and down the street. Seeing no witnesses, she produced small pruning shears from her fanny pack and reached deliberately over the fence. Michael held his breath as she expertly clipped 3 of the ripest Carolina Reapers, handling them with the confidence of someone who'd done this many times before. She examined one pepper appreciatively, even sniffing it before placing all 3 in a monogrammed produce bag. "The absolute audacity," Michael whispered, recording the evidence as Brenda resumed her power walk, tucking the bag into her pocket with a satisfied smirk. For 20 agonizing minutes, Michael continued his shower charade, imagining what would happen next. The Carolina Reaper wasn't just hot, it was weaponized capsaicin, a pepper so extreme that handlers wore respirators during harvest. Even touching it and then touching your eye could send you to the ER. His phone dinged with a neighborhood alert app notification. Ambulance on Oak Drive. Possible medical emergency. Oak Drive. Brenda's street. Michael dressed quickly and walked his dog past Brenda's house with feigned casualness. An ambulance sat in the driveway, lights flashing. Through the open front door, he glimpsed paramedics attending to someone in the kitchen. A cutting board with what appeared to be sliced tomatoes was visible on the counter. His phone buzzed with a text from Raj. "Did you hear? Brenda had some kind of allergic reaction. They're taking her to County General." Michael typed back, fighting to keep his expression neutral as he walked past curious neighbors. How terrible. Hope she's okay. But inside, he was already planning how to edit the video footage for maximum impact. The emergency HOA meeting email arrived at 8:47 p.m. Urgent board meeting tomorrow, 7:00 p.m. Attendance strongly encouraged. Michael arrived early, strategic USB drive in his pocket. The atmosphere in the community center was electric with gossip. Raj sidled up beside him.